The eyes are on the Jersey Shore. I am Vin Ebenau in the Town Square Media Jersey Shore newsroom, and my guest today is the Republican nominee for governor in New Jersey in 2021, Jack Ciattarelli, former New Jersey Assemblyman, and a guy familiar with the Jersey Shore and our WOBM Town Square Media studios. Jack, thanks for taking out some time. I know it's a busy campaign schedule heading through the middle of the summer here and heading towards November. I appreciate you coming out.
Vin, it's great to be back, and you don't have to thank me. We always love free advertising.
And we love a sunny day, too, so we've got plenty of that, and a good summer so far. Summer much different than this point last year with the COVID pandemic. Certainly a lot of tragic things happening with the pandemic, people dying, people getting very sick, people being forced to stay at home. A lot of different things happened, and something that I think even growing up, none of us were really preparing for. Who knew that we would have to go through a pandemic and figure out what to do and when and how? Early on it was figuring out, okay, how does this virus spread? Where does it come from? What needs to be closed? What can stay open? Mask necessary, not necessary? Flash forward, I mean, a year and a half later plus, I mean, here we are now. Cases are in a much better place, less hospitalizations and so forth. But I mean, there's been a lot of debate about what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened, lack of transparency. I'll say to just the general public, let alone the media from the state, and then I just think to businesses and general residents too, with not being able to know what's going on, what they can and can't do, and it's created a lot of frustration. It's brought on a lot of finger pointing on both sides of the aisle, and even in single parties themselves here. So a lot to digest here, but looking back on the pandemic and how it's taken us to this point in time, how would you have changed anything? What would you have done? Would you have kept anything the same with what was put into place in terms of restrictions or safety protocols?
Vin, the very first deaths in this country from the virus took place in Washington State in a nursing home. From the very beginning, we knew who the most vulnerable were. So Phil Murphy's decision to order nursing homes to take in COVID-19 patients discharged from the hospital is the reason why New Jersey leads the nation in COVID-19 deaths. In fact, if New Jersey was a nation, we'd lead the world in COVID-19 deaths on a per capita basis because of Phil Murphy's decision to force nursing homes to take in COVID-19 patients discharged from the hospital. And the greatest number of nursing home deaths took place in the 3 state-owned and operated nursing homes that housed our veterans. And so that's one thing I would never have done. And to show how leadership matters, in Florida, which has twice the population of New Jersey and the largest senior citizen population in the country, they have 1/2 the nursing home deaths because the governor there said, no way, no how are we taking COVID-19 patients discharged from the hospital and putting them back in our nursing homes. That's something I definitely would have done differently. I certainly would have treated nursing homes just as we did hospitals too. I would have gotten them PPEs. We didn't do that in the very beginning. Phil Murphy didn't. I would have gotten them test kits. My mother's 89. She resides in a nursing home, or what we now know today as long-term care facilities.
Right.
These are, if you will, hospitals in many ways. And they should have been treated just like hospitals, and they weren't. And it's the reason why New Jersey, again, leads the nation in nursing home deaths. I think on Main Street we shut down too much for too long, and there were terrible inconsistencies in the executive orders. If you owned a jewelry store on Main Street, Phil Murphy shut you down, said you were non-essential. But yet, at Costco, the jewelry counter was allowed to stay open. If you owned a bike shop, you were allowed to stay open to do repairs, but you couldn't sell a bike. But Walmart was allowed to sell a bike. Those kind of inconsistencies were not only maddening, but they caused undue hardship on Main Street. And as a result of shutting down too much for too long and all the inconsistency in the executive orders, 1 out of 3 small businesses in this state have closed their doors forever. 50% of these businesses owned by minorities and women. I would have also handled the school situation differently. I think the governor showed a real lack of leadership here. I think the data was pretty clear. Remote learning didn't work. I think the science is pretty clear. We didn't spread the virus by our schools being open. And I think the reality was pretty clear. Moms and dads wanted their kids back at school, particularly K through 5 and special needs students. And that caused a vicious cycle, because if you don't get the K through 5 kids or the special need kids back to school, guess what can't happen? Mom and dad can't go back to work, and more specifically, mom. That lack of leadership by Phil Murphy had a really discriminatory and disproportionate effect on women, who more times than not were the ones that had to stay home with the kids.
You know, you said a lot that data determines dates, and it said it so much that people just became dismissive of it. But a lot of people didn't even know what data he was using, what science was behind it, and what health answers he was using to try to figure out these dates. Would you, and if in a particular scenario, not necessarily in a pandemic world here, given the information you can have, whether it's pandemic related, responding to an emergency, responding to something else, would you be more forthcoming and transparent with information that could affect people's lives, their jobs, or would you just kind of be doing it on the fly?
I certainly would not be doing it on the fly, but I also think that part of being a leader is using your intuition in addition to the data and the science as to what's best. I really believe we got to a certain point where we better understood what was going on with the virus, and you have to release that information to people, and then to a certain degree let them self-regulate, right? Let them self-regulate. We put out all the warnings with regard to tobacco, don't we? We even put a Surgeon General warning on the side of the pack, and then we let people self-regulate. So, but look, this guy didn't rely on the science always. He was winging it. We just saw that a couple of months ago when the CDC said, if you're vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. And all of a sudden, Phil Murphy said, no, let's continue to wear masks here in New Jersey. Well, all of a sudden, where did the science go? Is not the CDC one of the foremost authorities? Governor Murphy, you've been relying on them for months. Why not now? We've seen this again with kids in school, where one week we're saying kids have to wear masks. The next week he says, well, kids don't have to wear masks in school, but we're going to leave it up to the local school boards. Again, there's a great deal of inconsistency, and what we call in the business world a CYA with this governor. That's not leadership.
What would your stance be on mandating mask or non-mandating mask, or passing the buck, so to speak, to local school districts and kind of washing your hands of it? Should students, especially those under the age of 12 where there is no vaccine, should they be forced to wear masks in school and even on a school bus? Any student in general, which is kind of what's being pitched right now. Should children have to wear masks in the school bus and at school? Should schools still have to, come September, have to put up the dividers, provide that social distancing, or do you feel we're in a spot in the pandemic where you feel comfortable knowing what you know, that none of that stuff should be mandated, but if somebody chooses to wear a mask, they will certainly be encouraged?
We should not have a vaccine mandate, in my opinion, particularly amongst our young, those 18 and younger, and I don't think there should be a mask mandate in schools. I think it should be optional. And I think when you leave it up to the local governing authorities, let's not forget, Vin, here in New Jersey, 565 towns, 600 school districts, okay? It's not like, in Virginia, there's 8 townships in the entire state. In Connecticut, you've got 10 counties that are the governing bodies. Here in New Jersey, we're very unique. 565 towns, 600 school districts. When you leave it up to the locals, you're going to end up with a patchwork. And there's going to be a great deal of confusion. I think the state should set the tone. And under Governor Ciattarelli, there would not be a mask mandate for our students. I think it should be optional.
I do want to touch on a couple of points off of that one, just about the economy, where we're at because of the pandemic, even what was happening to the Garden State well before the pandemic. But I want to touch on the schools, since that's where we're at. With the school funding formula, S2, sort of been, I guess, a savior to those underfunded districts who were trying to figure out how they could fund certain projects, fund staff, and then to others it's been a dagger to their budgets. Definitely a bunch around the Jersey Shore in particular. Toms River set to lose $8 million in the upcoming school year. That's the second most for any district in the entire state, and by a lot too. Freehold, Brick, Jackson, others around the shore losing a lot of funding. Senate President Steve Sweeney told me and another reporter a couple years ago, he said the school funding based on weighted social and economic issues and the formula designed to have every district receive 100% of the funding, no more, no less. And conversations I've had with school leaders, groups going out to try and plead to not have any aid cut, are saying, hey, look, listen, we're not saying that the underfunded districts should not get any money, but why are you taking money from us to make it happen instead of giving us the money we need to make upgrades to facilities, keep staff and everything in the buildings and around the district? Is there any kind of way, either whether from your background as a CPA or just a way to have balance in schools so that nobody's looking, okay, well, what do we cut? What positions do we cut? How do we find a way to get under this while losing, in Tom's River's case, $8 million?
New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the nation. They've only gotten higher and higher under Phil Murphy. I'm telling you, job number one for me is to lower property taxes, and we can do it with a new school funding formula. The current formula and the way it disadvantages a town like Tom's River, a town like Bridgewater Township, a town like Parsippany, is the current formula is nefarious, it's arbitrary, it's unfair, and I will go as far as to say it's unconstitutional. We recently did a social media post of an ad I found in the Sunday newspaper real estate section of a $1.1 million home in Jersey City that pays only $10,000 a year in property taxes. A $400,000 home in Tom's River pays more than that. Why? Because of the way we distribute state aid under the current school funding formula. Under Governor Ciattarelli, in my very first budget, we will have a new school funding formula that provides a flatter and more equitable distribution of state aid for schools, and we can lower property taxes, and we can do that without leaving any child or any community behind and without adversely affecting the quality of education. And Vin, listen, it's no accident that the towns that get the greatest amount of state aid have a cost per pupil that's off the charts. The analogy I always use is,
right,
if you're going to buy my groceries for me every single week out of your pocket, you know, Vin, I love filet mignon and lobster tail, buddy.
Don't we all?
You get
it does come with a price tag, yeah.
It comes with a price tag.
Yeah.
So we can do this without leaving any child or community behind, without adversely affecting the quality of education. We need a new school funding formula. And for me, it's something along the lines of X for every English-speaking student, Y for every English language learner, and the state takes over the cost of special ed. Because there should not be disparity in the quality of special education from one district to the next.
Would you, and you could have already talked to not just the men and women in the Assembly and the Senate, but the local school leaders, the local leaders in the communities in these towns about working towards a solution, say, what works for us may not work for somebody up north or down south. You know, different towns, different communities, different needs, different school districts. Tom's River, one of the larger school districts in the entire state. Would you, and any conversations you've had to this point on the campaign trail as well, but if governor, would you continue to have those conversations with local school districts to hear them out? Here's what we need. Here's some ideas that we've come up with in determining what could happen on perhaps maybe finding that approach that works across the board, but working with the local school districts to say, okay, here's what may work for you, here's what won't work for you, but at least hearing them out.
Vin, whenever I've been asked what's the job of an elected official, I always say the same answer year after year that I've been involved, and that's to listen. Just because you're the governor, just because you're a mayor, doesn't necessarily mean you have all the answers. And so you've got to engage with people on the front lines, particularly those who are directly impacted by the policy that you're putting in place. So I've always prided myself with listening. I've always had a greatest relationship when I was in the legislature for 6 years with the School Boards Association, with the superintendents, with the principals, with parents. You've got to listen, and you've got to go out and make your case. And I'm convinced that with me demonstrating leadership as to what's wrong with the current formula and what the parameters should be for a new formula, that those conversations take place, and through collaboration, we're going to come up with something that works for all of New Jersey. All of New Jersey. Because right now, that's not the case. Tom's River is getting screwed.
And in many other towns and districts feel that way. Not just around the Jersey Shore, that's where we are, but I mean across the state as well. I've talked to district leaders in South Jersey and across the state. They, well, hold on. Why do we have to get cut aid? Why does this have to happen to us? Why can't there be some sort of blanket policy that works for everybody? Okay, here's what you need based on what you're getting, and so on and so forth. I mean, schools is so important to be able to force schools to lay off staff, administrative, and teachers who are such huge instruments in the life of a child, and as they grow and develop and learn more about the world around them, teachers are an important part of our lives. Teachers, social workers, guidance counselors, they're such an important part of who our children become, who the future, and what the future looks like.
Here's what the Supreme Court in New Jersey doesn't know, Vin. They don't know that a $1.1 million home in Jersey City pays only $10,000 in property taxes. So that demonstrates how unfair the current school funding formula is, because even the rich in a place like Jersey City benefit from the disproportionate distribution of the state aid. That's why we need a flatter, more equitable distribution of state aid. Here's something else the state Supreme Court doesn't know. If you're one of those towns that gets a lot of state aid, your cost per pupil might be $30,000. In Toms River, your cost per pupil is $16,000. Is that fair? Will someone please justify why it is to me that in that town you need $14,000 more to educate that student versus a student in Toms River? And so this is the argument we need to make before the state Supreme Court, and I'm confident under Governor Ciattarelli we can win it. And let me say this, if we do not, guess what I get to do if I have the privilege of serving the people of New Jersey for 8 years? I get a lot of Supreme Court nominations coming up in the next 8 years. We can make a difference.
Now, we hit on it before in terms of the economy, the budget, certainly into a recession because of the pandemic, the restrictions in place, everything, but I mean, for years, it's kind of who's handling state finances on either side, who's making the decisions, who's deciding to raise taxes across the board, property taxes, personal taxes, what, people are raising more. Okay, I'll raise taxes on you and on the rich. Oh, all right, well, see ya. It's becoming seemingly, in a lot of ways, less affordable to live and to work here. And some people are thinking that the middle class and the lower class are starting to become one across the state. So based on your background as a CPA, how is there, and I'm sure there's no easy way, but what is the best way to properly balance the budget without shooting taxes up even higher, but also finding a way to climb New Jersey out of its massive debt?
Vin, all throughout this campaign, I'm going to talk about 3 things that Phil Murphy never talks about. Property taxes, ours are the highest in the nation. The business climate here in New Jersey, year after year after year, and this isn't campaign rhetoric, this is a fact. New Jersey is considered the most unfriendly for business in the country. We have the worst business climate in the nation. You can't create jobs here in the state and have people achieve their American dream. The working poor is never going to find the middle class. The middle class is never going to get ahead. Seniors are not going to be able to retire here. Young people aren't going to be able to get a start here until we make New Jersey a better place to do business. And as an MBA CPA and 2-time successful business owner on Main Street, I know exactly what needs to be done to our tax code. So goal number 1, reduce property taxes, make New Jersey more affordable with a new school funding formula. 2, create more jobs by making this a better place to do business. We do that with significant changes to the tax code, and if you have the time, I'd love to get into some of those changes. And the third thing you need to do, which is something else Phil Murphy never talks about, reduce spending. Our state government is bloated, inefficient, and been corrupted by special interests. It needs to be downsized, it needs to be streamlined, it needs to be modernized. I will do that. So those are the 3 things that I will do to make New Jersey overall a place where people feel confident they can achieve their American dream, and no matter where you are on the socioeconomic ladder, you can get ahead.
Now, how complicated of a process is all of that? And once you start to chip into that, lower taxes, cut into the debt, make things a little more affordable for people to work and live here, would people be able to see something right away, or is this something that would take a couple of years before they would see any kind of impact?
Then it'll be reflected in my very, very first budget. And listen, my job as the Republican nominee is to produce a Republican majority, and I'm working hard to do that. If by chance I don't produce a Republican majority, I will work with the Democratic legislature to see this happen. I think there's a lot of Democrats that agree with where it is I'm trying to take New Jersey. Know this, there was a recent national CPA journal. I read those things. Sorry, gang. And it revealed what the average citizen in every state pays over their lifetime in total taxes if they spend their entire lifetime in that state. Guess who was dead last?
New Jersey?
Nearly $1 million in taxes for the average citizen over their lifetime. The national average was a little over $500,000. 50% of your income in New Jersey goes toward all the taxes you pay. 50%. Massachusetts was 49, but they were $100,000 better than us. I mean, just think about that. If we could at the very least tie Massachusetts, that's $100,000 more you would have come retirement time, right? So listen, we've got to change. We've got to change. I really feel that this is a very sick patient that's in the ICU. And if we don't do anything, you know what happens. The next stop after the ICU, if things don't get better. It can be changed. With the right kind of changes to our tax code, with a new school funding formula, with a streamlined, more cost-efficient and modernized state government where we reduce spending, we can turn this ship around. And we will in my first budget.
Would it help to have somebody with that similar financial background, like a CPA, an accountant, who knows how to crunch the numbers, who knows the tax code, who knows how to help find deductibles for people and help them try to get more money back on their taxes? Would having somebody like that in your administration help with that goal of lowering taxes?
Listen, you see you see a certain trends in Phil Murphy's administration where they're all progressives. I haven't seen any progress. In Chris Christie's administration, you saw a lot of attorneys. It wouldn't surprise me if the Ciattarelli administration had a couple of CPAs in there. We know how to balance the ledger.
It just seems like it would make sense. Get people who know how to crunch the numbers, who could obviously legally and everything, but like understand each of the tax codes, how it works, how it could change, why it's so complicated in New Jersey as opposed to other states, with finding a way that would work for especially the other guy, the other gal, in regular average people working, each and every day, each and every week to put food on the table, to be able to open up their businesses and find a way to pay their own bills while being able to afford living here. And a lot of people like living here because they have family here, they grew up here, they have a lot of friends here, and they're kind of faced with that decision. Do I move out of the state to be able to afford living and working, or do I stay here where we have a nice Jersey Shore and I have family who live here?
Vin, we have it all here. No state has the modes of transportation we have between the ports, the airports, the rails, and the highways. No state has a ready, willing, and able middle class. No state has more PhDs and engineers on a per capita basis. We have everything. What I always like to say is we need to stop acting like the JV, right? South Jersey has tended to kind of operate in the shadow of Philadelphia, North Jersey sometimes in the shadow of New York City. We're New Jersey. We're New Jersey. Everything's here. There's no reason why we can't be an economic powerhouse and the envy of the other 49 states, and that is my goal. I don't like to talk about me because this really isn't about me. It's about people like you, and it's about New Jersey.
Sure.
So my staff will always say to me, can you talk about your qualifications a little more, Jack? And well, like I said, I don't like to talk about me, but let me say this. I'm an MBA CPA. I'm a two-time successful business owner. I've served at every level of government in this state. 2 terms at the municipal level. I know what potholes and public safety are all about. 2 terms at the county level. I know what infrastructure and social services are all about. And 3 2-year terms in the state legislature. So I know what waste, inefficiency, and corruption are all about. That's a very unique resume for somebody running for governor. MBA CPA, 2-time business owner, and someone that served at every level, term limiting himself every single time. In fact, at the municipal and county level, I didn't even take the benefits of the pay. So it's a very unique background. I think it's just what New Jersey needs right now.
Other legislative action I want to touch on too, and then just kind of broad brushing of the entire law enforcement community here, there, and everywhere. And it's not necessarily because something happened in the Garden State, but just kind of this broad brush. Police are bad. Police do this. Police do that. Instead of the things of a few years ago, or kind of growing up, where I grew up, you respected authority, respected law enforcement and police, and know that they're among the first responders who provide that safety for our community so that we can go and work and live and go have fun on a daily basis. I mean, through legislative action, among other things, taking away the immunity, altering police protocols. It's maybe having some in the law enforcement community considering an early retirement, or for teenagers, high school, college, men and women who are thinking about a career in law enforcement, maybe having second thoughts because of the things that are being taken away from law enforcement and the way people are and certainly not everybody, but the way some people are painting law enforcement, policemen and policewomen, as sort of these symbols of coming after you. And certainly for the people in the profession for the wrong reasons should be called out and handled criminally. And the prosecutor's offices, police departments around here are saying, this is unacceptable behavior, this is not what we do. How can we come back to restoring that respect for law enforcement, but more so just making sure that they have the protocols they need, the missions, the kinds of weapons, and everything they need to make sure that communities are safe? How do we restore some of that so that police officers feel safe and the police officers can go out knowing that they can go and do their job without facing any kind of criminal charges.
The governor and his or her attorney general is ultimately responsible for the public safety. And what you never hear from this governor or the attorney general recently moved on, our former attorney general, is what you never heard them say is anything that said they supported local law enforcement whose job has never been harder. In fact, their decisions and the executive orders that have come out of the attorney general have only discouraged people from pursuing law enforcement as a career. We used to get 20,000 applicants on an annual basis to be on the state police. The number of applicants is down to 2,000. We're discouraging people from taking a job that protects us. Mm-hmm. That's not good for what's going on in New Jersey. So I will say this governor will make sure New Jersey observes the rule of law and make sure that it has the back of local law enforcement, and my attorney general will as well. That hasn't been the case, and you've seen it time and again. And now, this discussion that has not been tamped down, in my opinion, the discussion with regard to disband, defund, and reimagine police. Anything that's good or great can always be made better, and I'll be the first to admit that we need some reforms. I think we need more females in uniform. I think we need more black people in uniform, more brown people in uniform. I think that we need more cultural competency training as part of their continuing professional development. I think it should be easier to get rid of a bad cop, just as it should be easier to get rid of a bad teacher. But we are not, under Governor Ciattarelli and my Attorney General, going to disband, defund, or reimagine. We'll make it better, but we will have their back. And you won't see executive orders coming out of my Attorney General's office like you can't use a canine any longer on a drug bust, or you can't use the car to engage in a pursuit if someone has had a hit and run or committed a crime. These are some of the things. Look at the recreational marijuana bill. We are handcuffing our local police. Their job has never been harder. Let them do their job and let them protect themselves in the process of doing a very, very dangerous job. So under Governor Ciattarelli, let me say one other thing. We're not getting rid of qualified immunity, and we're not going to have civilian review boards with subpoena power. We already have civilian review boards. It's called the mayor and council. Now, a reform I'll put in place is that every time a police chief has to discipline an officer, that case has to be heard by the mayor and council in executive session, and if they're not pleased with the way it was handled, they can take it to the prosecutor. But we don't need civilian review boards with subpoena power. Okay? We already have civilian review boards. It's the mayor and council.
To the local point of it that I made earlier with schools, would you be working with prosecutors across the state, with police chiefs in the New Jersey Chiefs of Police Association, as well as local police chiefs associations like in Ocean County, Monmouth County, across the state, in talking to local police chiefs about any concerns and issues that are on their mind, things that they would like to see addressed? Because towns, cities, boroughs, every municipality is affected similarly with some issues, but differently in a lot of others. And I think a broad brush policy is one of the concerns that these police chiefs on the local level have. Well, saying, well, that kind of thing doesn't really happen here, but yet we're handcuffed with what we can actually do.
Absolutely, Vin. I mean, one thing about having 565 towns is the needs of town A are going to be different from the needs of town B, whether it's school funding, quality of education, local law enforcement. So we can be very different across the state. As I always say, it's the largest small state in the union. And North is very different from Central, and both are very different from South Jersey. So we need to know what works. I will tell you what's not working, for example, right now. The state has done a takeover of Atlantic City. They cut the police department by 1/3 in a town whose population quintuples on a weekend in summer. Crime is off the charts. There are things going on in broad daylight that you used to only see in the movies. Okay? We need a different kind of leadership here in the state. The governor recently blamed what's going on in Atlantic City on the heat and humidity. I mean, that's profoundly embarrassing. That's not leadership. And the people there are crying out on all sides of the aisle.
Now, in terms of one of the quality of life issues, something that you've talked about on the campaign trail as well, is in regards to unborn children. I know you've supported the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act and parental notification of minors seeking an abortion, and opposed taxpayers funding abortions, and as well as opposing the proposed Reproductive Act. So how would you use these legislation play out if you're elected? How would you try to protect life?
So again, I think this comes back to what is the makeup of the legislature. And my job is to produce a Republican majority. If we do, I think some of those changes are easier, like parental notification, and how is it that we're going to use taxpayer dollars, certainly to promote women's health. I'm all about women's health. But if we're going to end up sending money to places like Planned Parenthood, I think that we should also send money to a lot of pregnancy resource centers that don't advocate for abortion, that talk to women about carrying the pregnancy full term. So I just think that there needs to be parity in the way that we do funding here in New Jersey. But let me be very, very clear. I'm all for women's health. I know there's a great many young women that rely on places like Planned Parenthood for things other than abortion.
Sure.
Other than abortion.
Now, no matter the issue here, how do you plan to work with fellow Republicans, and certainly, I guess, more of the challenge, Democrats in the state if governor, whether it's schools, the economy, quality of life issues, law enforcement, a way to try and work together as often as possible to at least hear each other out, hear what everybody has to say, have everybody hear what you have to say, and try to find a solution that doesn't work for you or for anybody else in the State House, but works for the 9 million residents that live and work in New Jersey as something like, okay, we work here every day. What are you doing for us as the people, as opposed to, okay, well, I'll do that for you because you did that for me, and kind of doing favors for each other in the State House. I'm not saying that anybody in particular is doing that, but I think people want a leader that will do something for them, that is doing something to make sure that they can live, survive, thrive in their daily lives, as well as going to work and having a business.
So I'm a very competitive guy, and this is a competition. We're in it to win it.
Sure.
But here's what everyone has always known about Jack Ciattarelli. The day the election is over, we have a responsibility to govern and to improve the quality of lives of people all throughout New Jersey, not just Republicans, not just Democrats, but all New Jerseyans. And so anyone that's followed my career knows that the day after the election, I'm all about governance. I'm all about what's doing in the best interest of people. I've never been rigid in my ideology. I've never been described as a hyper-partisan. And I think the other advantage I have, coming from the legislature, I have great respect for the legislature as an equal branch of government. They're an equal. So that means we have to partner. They need the governor needs them. Listen, I don't think it's any accident that the person who's considered the greatest governor of the last 40 or 50 years was the last one to come from the legislature. And that was Tom Kean Sr. So, my relationship with Democrats while I was in the legislature was very good, because they knew I wasn't ever a hyper-partisan. When I disagreed, it was on the policy. And I always showed them the respect. Hey, I won't be voting for your bill today, and here's why. I would give them an opportunity to talk me out of it. Sometimes they did, many times they didn't. But at least there was that mutual respect, where they would say, at least Ciattarelli came to me and told me why he was not voting for my bill. And so I think, again, it all starts with the governor. You set the tone, and I have great respect for others even when we disagree.
We'll close up with this. We'll have a little fun here. So, favorite things that you've done at the Jersey Shore from the time you were a kid to things that you've done with your family, going to different places, going on rides, beaches. I mean, are you a roller coaster kind of guy, a funnel cake kind of guy? I mean, what are some of the things that Jack Ciattarelli likes to do at the Jersey Shore?
I will tell you, Vin, I have extremely fond memories as a kid. I had 3 siblings, and my parents were very, very hard-working, middle-class New Jerseyans. Owned a restaurant bar. My mom worked midnights. My dad worked the street department, public service gas, as a pipe fitter. All of us piling it in the station wagon very early on a Saturday and making our way to Point Pleasant Beach. Spending all day on the beach, swimming in the ocean, sitting on the rocks along the inlet, watching the boats come in and out. Sometime around 5 o'clock, taking a cold shower up on the boardwalk for $1, and then heading down the boardwalk and having a hot dog or a hamburger, and then riding on a few of the rides. I mean, those are very fond memories. I will say, my wife and I, we've been in Surf City on Long Beach Island since 1997, and every year just gets better and better. Our 4 children are now in their 20s. And one thing I learned, Vin, about having a beach house, you'll always know where your kids are on the weekend. And now that they're in their 20s, I know where their significant others are too. So it never gets old. It never gets old. I won't see much of that beach this summer, but I'm okay with that. And they are
understandable.
too. And they are too.
Jack, thanks for taking out some time. I know it's a busy campaign schedule and everything, but I appreciate you coming to our studios here in Toms River and talking about some issues affecting New Jersey now and some things that you would like to implement if elected governor this November. So I appreciate you taking out some time. Thanks for coming in.
Vin, I appreciate the time. Look forward to next time.
That is the Republican nominee for governor of New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli. I am Vin Ebenau, and thank you for watching another episode of Eyes on the Jersey Shore.